You have all my myself, Grace.
No, Mary.
No, that's why they call you Mary.
Good afternoon, Ms. Humphries.
All right. Hello there, everyone. All right. It looks like we're still waiting on quite a few people to hop on here. So I'm going to wait about a minute or so. I know that it is 6 o'clock, so I won't wait super long because I want to honor your time, but I'll wait just a little bit longer and see if we have a few more people pop on, and then we'll get rolling. Okay. All right, friends, we'll go ahead and get started here. A couple people are still coming in. I'm letting them in the waiting room, but I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen like I always do. We'll go over our agenda for this evening, and then we'll get started. All right. So on the calendar for this evening, that's the wrong date. Let me keep scrolling. Hold on one second here. All right. Today is Tuesday, September 17th. So as you can see there on the calendar, we are starting a new unit today, starting argumentation. And so we'll go through kind of an introductory activity. And then from there, we'll start looking at some methods of argumentation, going through some of the common theories that are used in academic writing. And so, like I said, we'll start with an introductory activity. Then I'll have a little article for you to read. And I'm going to have you consider some of these questions listed here from the author's perspective. Then we will move into Aristotle and Rogers this evening. And so those are two very common methods of argumentation. And once we get into those, I'm sure you'll realize that you have seen those before. Okay. So without further ado, and please keep in mind, since when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see if anybody's in the waiting room. So if you notice somebody trying to get in or if somebody texts you, just let me know. Okay. All right. Methods of argumentation, just a brief little introductory activity that I want you to spend a little bit of time doing here. Right, just on a sheet of paper. It can be scrap paper, obviously, whatever you have laying around close to you. But I want you to choose one of these options, A, B, or C. As far as it just says write a letter. And so you've got some options here, but you are trying to be as persuasive. Sorry, letting a few more people in. Trying to be as persuasive as you possibly can. So think about all those ways in which you would try to persuade someone. So your first option here is to write a letter to your boss, persuading him, her, them that you deserve a raise, right? And think about all the reasons that you might use in order to be persuasive. The second option is to write a letter to Miss Humphreys, persuading her to give you an A on your last essay that you just submitted. I am in the process of grading those currently, by the way. Or option C, write a letter to your best friend, persuading him, her, or them to take a trip with you. Think about some place you're wanting to go or wanting to visit, and think about all the reasons why or how you're going to persuade them to go, especially if they're a little apprehensive about taking time off work or making travel arrangements. So I'm looking at the clock here. Let's see. It's about 6:05. So how about this? Take about 15 minutes here. And I want you to handwrite a letter. Again, you're going to choose A, B, or C, not all three, right? Just choose one. And I want you to be as persuasive as you possibly can. Then when we hop back on, we'll get into some groups and we'll start sharing and identify some commonalities and methods that we're trying to use to be persuasive. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to grab this information. Stop sharing. I'm going to go to the chat. Okay, your directions are in the chat, and we are going to meet back here ready to share at 6:15. Okay. All right, I will see you shortly. All right, my friends, if you could start making your way back. Looks like we had several people join us a little bit late, totally fine. All right, so the activity we were working on, trying to be persuasive or as persuasive as we can be, choosing um, one of those three prompts from above. So what I want to do next, I'm going to go ahead and put you into some smaller groups to share out. First thing you're going to do is talk about which of those three things you chose to write about. So did you choose to write to your boss, persuading him, her, or them that you deserve a raise? Or did you choose to write a letter to Miss Humphreys, persuading her to give you an A on your last essay that you submitted? Or the third option, a letter to your best friend, persuading him, her, or them to take a trip with you. So just want you to take a couple minutes here in groups to share what you wrote about. And if you're willing to read it, but talk about how you went about trying to be persuasive, okay? So here in just a second, you're gonna get some invites to some breakout rooms so that you can share. I'll try to go smaller group sizes here so everybody gets a chance. So make sure that you unmute and share with your group members. Okay, so you should be getting an invitation to a breakout room right now. So if you go ahead and click on that invite and share your persuasive letter. Hey, Emily, can you join the breakout room, okay? And Michaela, are you able to join the breakout room?
Yeah, I was just trying to send you a message real
Oh,
quick. It was about the narrative essay, but
okay.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was due tonight at midnight and not 2 days ago. So I'm finishing that up and I'm gonna submit it.
Okay, no problem. No problem at all. Just submit as soon as you can, okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I haven't got them all graded anyway. You're fine. Totally fine.
Thank you. I
Uh-huh.
will get going.
All right, how's it going in this group?
Good. We just discussed kind of like how we did it, but I was just kind of just telling them like how I thought it'd be a little bit easier than I thought, but it's actually harder than I thought. Just actually being more persuasive, just because I guess I really haven't wrote like that before, I guess, but a little tougher than I thought it would.
Oh, okay, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. All right, so has everybody in this group had a chance to share?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, it's gonna be just a second. Let me check in on the other groups, okay? Okay, has everybody in this group had a chance to share? Or is this the group I was just in?
Yeah,
I
yeah, this
think
is
I
on
was just
yeah,
in
it's
this
the
group.
you
Yep.
just did. Yeah.
Okay, I will try to learn to read because I cannot share. So
Okay.
it was mine was for my boss. It says, Dear Sean, good afternoon, Sean. Mainly, I hope you are well and healthy. The reason for this letter was to ask for a salary increase. As you know, I have been working with you for a year, and I wanted to know if a raise was possible. Since I am one of your best employers, I want sorry, I'm I'm one of the people who gets you more production out for you. I'm one of the best investors in delivering your production. I got the first place in production quality and the first place in quantity. Production increased by 30% since we made the past production type change that I recommended the last month, having a 13% in quality and a value of 1 million more in capital. With this said, I want to say that I'm open to any available. Let me see. To any available offer. Take into account
All right, I think maybe we have one more group maybe coming back here. I hope I didn't cut anybody too short. I was trying to kind of hop in and out of the breakout rooms to kind of gauge, to make sure everybody had a chance to read what they wrote, share what they wrote. I heard some good ones, but now is when I need some folks to be brave, and somebody to go ahead and maybe read what you have written for the group. And then we'll have some discussion kind of about some of the methods of persuasion that we hear folks using throughout their letters. So somebody be very brave and unmute and share with us your letter. Tell us who you're writing to, and then tell us what you wrote, okay?
If you don't mind, I would like to go. So I did the letter about the salary raise. Mine was, Dear boss, I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to discuss the possibility of a salary review. Over the past duration, I have taken on additional responsibilities and consistently delivered results that I believe have contributed significantly to our team's success. Specifically, I have briefly mentioned key accomplishments or projects, which have mentioned the positive impacts such as increased revenue, efficiency, or customer satisfaction. I have also actively sought out ways to improve our processes and support our team's goals, including mention any initiatives, trainings, or leadership roles. Given these contributions and my continued commitment to exceeding expectations, I would like to request a meeting to discuss a possible adjustment to my salary. I'm confident that my performance and dedication align with the increased responsibilities I've embraced and the value that I brought to the team. Thank you for considering my request. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to discuss this further. Best regards, Laith-Abasan.
Yes, Laith, very good. So I heard you using several different strategies. Very good. First off, just the language that you were using, very professional, very polite. I wrote down, I was taking notes as you were going there, but you're like best regards. And please, I'm interested in having a salary review. But then you provide a lot of reasons and a lot of evidence, right, as to why you felt like a salary review was necessary. Highly effective, I think. That's a very good letter, Leigh. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else willing to brave it and share with us what you wrote?
I can. I did the same one asking for a raise, even though I was late. So I didn't get a chance to write, but I, off of muscle memory, share with the group. So I chose that one because I'm 31. I've been working since I was like 17 years old. And oftentimes I find myself doing more than the role that I accepted. So in that case, I would make sure to mention, like, I don't mind the extra task, especially if I was trained on them properly and I know what I'm doing. I just think that it would be fair to be compensated for those things, seeing how my role has changed and transitioned to more than we originally agreed on, because me accepting a job was me agreeing to do the task that was displayed in a description, but now I'm doing way more than that. So that's why I would choose that one.
Yes, very good. Again, love it. Yeah, a lot of reasons and evidence, right? Like here's why. And then providing those concrete details. That's perfect. I love it. Okay, well, let's do how about one more person willing to brave it and share with us.
I would say I was going to do the one about the A, but I was like, I don't know if I would get an A. Hopefully, if I do that one.
I love it. I love it.
I did the first one too, but I'm not pretty good reading, just to let you know.
Oh,
It's
it's
my
okay,
second
too.
language, so I just would like to share a little bit. I did the same thing about to the race for talk to your boss and everything. So I said, Dear Sean, good afternoon, Sean. Mainly, I hope you're well and healthy. The reason for this letter was to ask for a salary increase. As you know, I have working with you for a year, and I wanted to know if a raise was possible. Since I am one of the best employees, I'm one of the people who gets you more production out of you. I'm the best and fastest at delivering your production. I got the first place in production quality and the first place in quantity. Production increased by 30% since we made the past production type change that I recommended last month. Having a 13% in quality and value of 1 million more of capital. With this said, I want to say that I am at your disposal. Let me see. I love the job,
You
but
was
I feel
nervous for nothing. You did so good.
thank you. I feel that my 4 deserves a little more pay. I'm very well with my salary, but since I have been there for one year, I would like to get a greater benefit. I was thinking approximately about a 20% more if it is possible. So thank you and blessing and good wishes. And that's it.
Ah, very good. Very good. Yes. So again, I'm going to talk about several things I noticed, right? Tone, very professional, very polite, not demanding. But I did notice that you use some percentages or some numbers within your mode of persuasion there, trying to use those numbers. I heard the 20% increase in raise, what you're asking for. And you given a 30% number for like product increase. And so I definitely think those numbers are beneficial, right? Using facts and statistics, definitely a strong mode of persuasion. Yes, as well as tone, right? That very polite, professional, friendly tone, not coming in demanding a raise. So very good, all 3 of you. Very, very nice job with that. I definitely think, there are multiple ways that we can be persuasive, but I also think that, it's not something that's limited just to writing, right? In our everyday lives, we persuade, whether we're persuading, our toddler to put shoes on, right? Or in my case, trying to get my kid to get dressed in the morning to go to school, or you're trying to persuade a coworker to go see a movie with you, right? Or you're trying to persuade your best friend to go to a certain restaurant, right? We're trying to persuade a lot. It's actually very common, but I do think in writing, at least in an academic setting, it can look a little bit different. But what all 3 of you who shared there just demonstrated very similar to what we're going to be looking at a little more in depth in this particular unit, but we'll be putting some labels on some of those strategies, right? We'll be talking about ethos, logos, and pathos, which all 3 of you used, by the way. We'll also be talking about the Toolman model of argumentation, which if anybody's ever taken like a debate class in high school, or if you ever watched a debate, the Toolman model of argumentation, very common in debate. But we'll also talk about the Rogerian method of argumentation, which is really instead of arguing to try to win, right, you're trying to argue for a shared understanding or a compromise. And so that's where we're headed in this particular unit. So bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen as I transition us to the next item in our count on our agenda for today on the calendar. Okay, so what we're going to look at now, I'm going to give you 2 tasks to do, and then I'll release you and have you come back here. But what we've got next, I have a video here that I want you to watch, preferably this first one. But if you want to watch them both, you can. But the information in these videos is just to give you some context about this particular article that I'm going to have you read, right? So the article is about FERPA. And so in order to kind of understand the background there, I think you do need to watch those videos to learn about a little bit about what FERPA is and what it means. And then I'm going to have you read this article, College Kids Have Too Much Privacy. And as you are reading the article, I want you to jot notes, just on a sheet of paper, answering these questions, okay? What is she arguing, as in the author of that piece? What is it that she's arguing? What choices is she making to be persuasive? Okay, so is she using facts and statistics? Is she using emotional language? Is she using a calm and polite tone, right? How exactly is she going about being persuasive? Then I put on here, what do you consider to be this article's weaknesses? And you're going to find some for sure. We're going to be like, And where do you think some fact checking or some healthy skepticism might be needed? Right. So anytime we're evaluating argument, we're always going to keep in mind that someone is trying to persuade us to do something, right? To go out and act, or they're trying to persuade us to change our opinion. Okay. And anytime that is the case, and you're reading a persuasive speech or not speech, persuasive piece, you want to be thinking about, okay, are these the facts, right? Do I need to fact check anything? And so I just want that to become a common practice for you, especially as we're evaluating written argument. Again, knowing that the goal of the writer is to persuade you to do something or to change your way of thinking, I really want you to be thinking about that. Okay, so what should I fact check here, if anything? Okay, so you're going to do two things as I release you here. You're going to watch this video, or both of them if you want, about FERPA, just to learn about what FERPA is, because you're going to have to know what it is in order to understand this article, right? And then I want you to read College Kids Have Too Much Privacy, and I want you to answer these questions as you're reading. Okay, so that's a little bit more. It is 6:50 now, so let's meet back at 7:20, ready to discuss. Okay, so you're going to have to come into the calendar here because there's several links. I don't know if I can put them all in the chat, but to get the links to the video, you're going to watch that video first. Okay, and then you're going to read College Kids Have Too Much Privacy and answer these questions as you are reading. Okay, so let's meet back at 7:20, ready to talk about this article. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will mute. All right, my friends, if everybody could start making their way back. I show that it is 7:20. Hopefully that gave you enough time to read, well, to watch the videos about FERPA, learn a little bit about what FERPA is and what it means, and then to read this particular article titled College Kids Have Too Much Privacy, and to answer those questions. And so hopefully I gave you enough time to do that. Sorry, I have a kind of a sore throat. Let me get a drink real quick. I'm struggling with some kind of a cold. Both of my kids have colds too. So, okay, so let's start with the first question. We're just going to go large group here. So let's just start with the first question. College kids have too much privacy, right? Goes into the whole background about FERPA. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Let's just stick to the questions here. Okay, so what is it that is being argued in this particular piece? What is she arguing overall? I'm going to mute. Somebody be brave.
I think she's arguing. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I
No,
mean,
you got it. I talked last time.
that's okay. She's just arguing that pretty much if she is the person that is responsible for the payment, then why can she not be notified of pretty much what's going on with her student slash child? And that FERPA law says that you can't if they're 18. So pretty much she just wants to be involved if she's paying. It sounds like the best to me.
Okay, anybody want to add to that?
Yes. I wrote down that parents are kind of being thrown in the same category as a stranger because they don't have access to anything once their children turn 18.
Yes, all of that correct. Very good. For sure, right? And from the title, we kind of know where she's going with her argument, right? That college kids have too much privacy, right? And she's bringing in, all of these examples of where she feels like, in fact, college kids do, in her opinion, have too much privacy. So let's move to this next one. What choices is she making to be persuasive, right? She wants us to take her stance, okay? She wants us to adopt the stance that college kids have too much privacy, right? And that we should get rid of FERPA so that parents have more access. What exactly is she using? And somebody and I were messaging about this a second ago. What is it that she's using to be persuasive? There's a lot of different tactics she uses. What are some of those tactics that she uses to try to persuade us to believe what she believes?
So what I have written down is that she tries to persuade people with using quotes from professors and universities. And then I've also noticed that she's also using parents' ignorance and possibly a fear of not being able to help their children in play.
Definitely. You touched on some really, really big ones. But I think definitely she is, well, obviously, who is, when we talk about this, who is this piece being written for? Is it being written for college students or their parents?
Their parents.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's clearly geared towards parents. And so I love it how you talked about fear, right? There's a definite emotional aspect to her writing here where she's trying to appeal to fear and to reason, right? And I think one of the ways that, you appeal to parents is talking about safety. And so when she's bringing in the whole idea of student safety and not knowing what's going on with your own child, right, definitely plays into that emotion of fear. But not only that, but like responsibility and love for a child. So a lot of emotion in this particular piece. Very good. Okay, somebody else. What other tactics or methods is she using to be persuasive here?
She did mention that like that's not something that the kids even wanted. And I guess if you go back to when the law was originally passed, it kind of just depends on who was fighting for this to go through. And now that we are older in college, I would assume most of us don't even know or didn't know until today that it even existed unless somebody told us about it. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, y'all did all this work to get this approved to withhold information for parents when some students ain't even aware of it. So.
Yes, very true. Very true. Good. Okay, let's move to the next part here. I'm curious, and somebody again was messaging me about this privately through the chat, but what are the article's weaknesses? What if you had to pick out some weaknesses in this article or in her argument, what are you going to pick out? What do you think could be stronger?
I feel like one thing that she didn't do was mention why FERPA was put there in the first place. Like I feel like her argument would have been stronger if she brought up some of the points that originally got it approved and then kind of disputed those, like instead of like the only argument she really made was that they're giving students like the big responsibilities like too early, like adult responsibilities like too early, and that they're still like children. But if she would have brought up like why someone decided to give them the privacy, that would have made it for a stronger argument.
Love that. Very good. Very good. What are some other things that would have made it stronger, or other things you consider a weakness?
Well, I felt like her paragraphs didn't like transition very well. They were kind of like all over the place to me.
Yes, which is definitely a sign of emotional writing, right? Being emotionally invested and perhaps not really sitting down and thinking through, the overall argument and trying to make it smooth. I really wish, I don't know, and maybe this is just a personal thing on my part, but I really wish she would have actually like quoted some students within this piece, like maybe interviewed some college students, right? To like show us that, listen, college students don't even know what FERPA is. Or if she would have, interviewed some students about, I mean, just any perspectives on FERPA. Like, I'm sure there are many students out there that are paying their own tuition, right? And don't wish for their parents to know anything about their college education. Whereas I'm sure there are other students whose parents pay for everything and have access to everything. And so I don't know, that's just me personally. I could just kind of wish that she would have brought in some student perspectives. Are there any other perspectives that you feel like are missing or that could be added?
I agreed with that she needed quotes from students, or that she was just assuming what the students wanted, or like how they would feel about it.
Yeah, and I think especially when she's talking about like some of the health issues, because I know on college campuses, there are historically, I don't know about currently, but some women's like healthcare and reproductive centers. Students would have access to those on like college health campuses, and a lot of students didn't want their parents to have access to that. And so I don't know. Again, I just really wish there would have been some like student quotes or perspectives in there as well, or even some other parents' perspectives. Maybe some other parents that are feeling kind of the same way. I think that might have helped too.
I was gonna say that, or if she could have got some more parents' point of views, then it could have made a stronger argument. So it don't just seem like, this is just one person coming forward. So yeah, I agree.
Agreed. Okay, now the last question I want you to think about here, right? I told you anytime somebody's trying to persuade us, right? A lot of times using emotionally charged language, only bringing in really their side, right? Not talking about and I guess that's something that was missing too, right? The other side of the argument, like where is FERPA a good thing? Where does it really protect students, and what are some examples of that, right? It would have been nice to see that other side, right? And then maybe she could have refuted that information. But throughout this piece, though, I want you to be thinking about knowing that her goal is to persuade. Where is some fact checking perhaps beneficial, or where is some healthy skepticism needed? So, what did you read that you were like, I don't know about that? Like, what made you question, or what made you think, maybe I should, open a Google tab and check this out? Were there any places where you felt like there needed to be some fact checking?
I was thinking, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
You can
Please go ahead.
Okay. Kind of along the lines of what you were saying, I was thinking it would be good to have more student perspectives, especially because if you were just to altogether like get rid of FERPA, and then, if a student was like didn't have a relationship with their parents and they didn't want them to see that and they were paying for it on their own, you know, that their parents could use that against them and it could be more harmful. And if you erase, you know, that, then that kind of just gets rid of all their privacy. So maybe we need to look more specifically at like specific aspects of FERPA and not just like, no, get rid of all of it.
I agree with what you just said, Riley. Because I felt two ways about it. One way was if there is like there could be some students who are paying for it out of pocket by themselves, who are detached from their family members due to like violence or certain things. So you don't know, and you do want them to be protected, right? And then I also understand mom's point of view because she did mention like if I am paying for this, like instead of me, like I would like to know where my money is going because you can see in this case, and this may not be like this for everybody, but the child was kind of irresponsible, didn't go to class for the last 2 years. So it's like, where is my money? Where did it go? I'm under the illusion that I'm paying for something else and I'm not. So I kind of felt two ways, but I do see like why you can withheld like your dorm information and things of that like that. I think that that part of it was okay. Because you don't want people to know where you stay, like whether you're in college, like you really don't want people to be able to come and find you. So I understood that point of view, but it was, and I don't know, maybe that's the emotional side of me coming out because I am a mom. So it's like if I'm going to pay for your college, it's kind of like, or I'm thinking I'm paying for your college, I should be able to make sure you're on top of everything. But also, it's on parents like you can check in. You can go up to the school like in 2 years. Like, did you drop by? Did you see if they? But it did mention like you kind of got to take the kids' word for it. But I'm proactive. Like we're about to go up here, coming to visit you. Like something like that.
Yeah, I love that you said that. There's one point in the article where she talks about how getting like a FERPA waiver to where parents have access. She described that as being a laborious process, being like very labor intensive and a long process. Whereas my students at Lee Summit West who are in my college credit class, they're taking it for dual credit. So they're actually, it's like I'm their college professor, but they see me at Lee Summit West, if that makes sense. But so they have to actually sign a FERPA release form. So it's exactly what that article is about. They have to take it home to their parents. And because most of them are not 18, right? A lot of them aren't. They have to sign this waiver for their parents to have access to their grades, which their parents have access to through Lee Summit West anyway. But really, it's just a form, right? It's just one form. You take it home. There's a couple boxes you check. Your parent signs, the student signs. So really, it's a really fast process. And so when I read that, when she's like, it's a laborious process, I was like, is it? Like, I don't know. Because in my perspective, it hasn't been a super hard process. Literally, it's like one form, like I said, with a couple check marks and some signatures. But I agree with what I can't remember who was just talking, Tanzania, what you were saying, like as a parent, obviously if I'm paying the bill, I expect to see grades and things like that. And so whether that's just a conversation with my kids or, basically you sign the form so I have access or I'm not going to pay the bill, I think that's all of that's an interesting dynamic because and I'm not defending parents. I'm just saying that like at the high school level, parents have 24-hour access to attendance and grades and medical things, right? Everything. And then as soon as they step foot on a college campus, all of those rights are revoked and all of those rights are given to the student. And so, but students can literally just fill out some paperwork and give their parents access to all that. So it's kind of interesting, right? And so if I were truly going to dig into this, I would really do some fact checking around what is that process, right? What does that look like to allow parents to have access to grades and attendance and health stuff? Like, is it just one form? Is it multiple forms? Or is it a super long, intensive process? And so again, if I were going to fact check, that's something I would dig into a little bit deeper. Okay, before we move on, any other closing thoughts or anything that we have missed about the article, College Kids Have Too Much Privacy? All right, then I am going to transition us then back to the next item on our agenda. So bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen and not my email. Sorry about that. Okay, the next item on our agenda, why is the chat popping up? Sorry about that. Is to go into one of these specific modes of argumentation that we want to talk about. Right, so we've been speaking in general terms about persuasion, right? Using facts and statistics, quotes from credible sources, using polite language, trying, if we are being emotional or we're pulling in stories or outside sources, right? Using all of those things as methods of persuasion. Now we're going to start putting some names or some labels to some of those tactics. And so the first method of argumentation that I want to cover with you is the Aristotle method of argumentation. And so this is linked on the calendar. Also, if you want to jot down notes as I'm going through this, just a couple of slides here. I'm going to skip some of the videos in these slides, but I do think it's important that we put some labels to some of the things that we've already been talking about. You already recognize that these are things that we use to be persuasive. Now we're just going to add a label to it. So again, it's the Aristotle intro right here on the calendar. If you want to follow along on your screen, you can, or you can jot down notes as we're going and come back to those slides as you need to. So the Aristotle method of argumentation, or perhaps you've heard it called Aristotle's rhetoric, very common. And here's what the rhetorical triangle, so I'm throwing some other terms out here for you, rhetorical triangle you might have heard of in the past. And so when we're talking about the triangle, okay, we're talking about the speaker, the writer, the context in which they are writing and speaking, and then the audience and or reader interpreting that particular text, okay? So the article we just read, and I already forgot her name, right? But the author's writing. She's writing with her audience being parents, right? Other concerned parents, in a context in which she is upset, right? She is wanting some change. She's wanting more rights turned back over to parents. And she cites lots of different things, anything from safety to anecdotes or stories, and to quotes from famous universities and professors. And so that's what we're talking about here with the triangle, right? Where's the speaker or writer coming from? What's the context in which they're writing? And then who is the reader or audience that's going to be hearing or seeing this particular text? Okay, now here are the methods that I really want to focus on. Ethos, pathos, logos, or you've perhaps heard ethos, pathos, and logos. Those pronunciations are all correct, technically. And so these are the primary things that we would look for in an Aristotle method of argumentation. Okay, so coming up, one of your assignments is going to be to read another article that is attempting to be persuasive. And I'm going to ask you to find examples of each one of these. I'm going to ask you to find some examples of ethos for us to talk about. I'm going to ask you to find some examples of pathos for us to discuss, and some examples of logos. And so some definitions of these things will help. Okay, so let's get to those. So first off, let's talk about ethos or ethos. You might hear it called that. This is where we're talking about credibility, right? And so if you are quoting a Harvard professor, right, that's credibility. Or if you're saying so-and-so PhD, right, that's credibility. Or, if I'm talking about the NBA and I bring up LeBron James, that's credibility, that's ethos, right? Because that's someone who is a professional or an expert in their field. And that's how we really build that ethos, right? Giving that background information about why this person is trustworthy. Okay, why is this person believable? I put here, how do speakers and writers establish ethos? Right, well, they do this by almost seamlessly pulling in credible and noteworthy people or institutions, experts in the field, and bringing in their opinions. A lot of times using a quote, or building in some research on that particular person. And so, like I said, it's not always going to be like a Harvard professor, right? If I were writing something persuasive about the NBA, and I brought in LeBron James, or I brought in, any of the big players, Steph Curry, any of those people are going to be credible. And so therefore that would be me trying to establish some ethos, right? These are experts in the field. Okay, in writing, it's typically going to be some sort of credentials, like maybe they're pulling in a psychology expert and quoting them and some of the stuff that they've studied, right? Trying to establish that here's a quote, but here's why that quote is believable. It's coming from this expert from this institution who has this many years worth of hands-on experience in the field. Okay, so that's ethos or ethos, depending on how you pronounce it, right? Building that credibility or establishing knowledge. Okay, and pathos. And this is what I would say college kids have too much privacy. That article we just read, I think, relies predominantly on pathos, right? It is a very emotional piece, which, my friends, can be very effective, right? A lot of writers are going to appeal to your emotions, and the big emotions that usually create the most change. And somebody mentioned this, fear, right? Fear drives people to action. It's just fact. Right, it does. And if that writer, right, if she can convince other parents that they should be fearful about what their students are experiencing in college, she's going to be able to persuade a lot of people to believe and maybe take action the way she wants them to. Right. And so, as readers, though, we have to be able to pick up on, okay, here's where somebody is intentionally trying to get me worked up, or they're trying to get me sad, or they're trying to get me angry. Right. And that should be kind of a pause moment for you. Okay, why am I having this reaction? How is this being written to elicit my response? And should I or should I not believe what I'm reading? Okay. So I put in here, in what ways do speakers and writers try to appeal to emotions? Well, several different ways. Gosh, my throat. I'm sorry, you guys. But they're going to use several different things. One of the most common ways to establish emotion is to use a story, right? A personal story, or a story about kids, right? A story about animals, right? Those are things that get people emotionally invested, especially if there is some sort of injustice, right? If there is something happening that goes against some civil rights, that is going to get people emotionally invested. And I put here, how might an audience's emotions change the speaker's or writer's approach? Well, for one, I think it's different in both of those contexts, right? If you're delivering an oral speech, and you can tell the audience by how, their facial expressions, their mannerisms, that they're like, okay, maybe you're going to change course mid-speech, right, to be more persuasive. But in writing, it's a little more difficult because you can't just change on a dime, right? Once you publish something, it's out there and you kind of have to go with it. But I do think that one way, that the writers or readers' emotions might change that, right? I think writers are going to use more methods of persuasion because they're trying to appeal to different senses, right? Or different areas or beliefs. And so usually they're going to vary styles a little bit more. Whereas, a presidential candidate giving a political speech, or a congressman or a senator, any of them, right? They are going to ad lib a lot, right? They're going to notice and feed off of the audience's energy. And if it's not the energy they want, they're going to change, right? Because they are trying to get people, in this case, to vote for them, right? So pathos, consider pathos to be like emotional, loaded language, right? Something that's trying to elicit an emotional reaction from you as the listener or reader. And the last one, logos. And this is one we talked a little bit about. I was quoting somebody earlier from their letter when they were trying to get a raise, right? And they'd use like 30% and 20%. Anytime you see numbers, percentages, any kind of numbers, it's going to be logos. Logos is short for logic or logical appeals. And so what people do to be logical, right, is they're going to usually give us some sort of numbers. Numbers are the easiest way to appeal to logic because most people understand numbers. I quoted here from our textbook that logos is defined as facts, reasons, and opinions that are based on reality. But what I would tell you, more often than not, logos is going to be anytime you see numbers. 50% of people believe this. Or 90% of parents wish they had more access to college, their college kids' records, right? Anytime you bring in those numbers, it establishes a sense of reason and logic for the reader and or the listener. I put here, what are specific types of logical appeals, right? Anything that is going to be, an absolute fact, like the angle of a right triangle is 90 degrees, right? I'm just making this up on the fly, but right, everybody knows that that's a common fact. And so that's logos. Or anytime you include, again, percentages, statistics, numbers of any sort, always going to be logos. Again, stands as short for logic or logical appeal. Okay, and that is actually where I'm going to stop. I'm going to kind of talk you through these next couple of slides here. What I did here, I gave you some videos, and if you have time later to go back and watch them, you might enjoy it. But so it's this very famous musician. They take him out of a music hall where he is used to performing, and they move him into, he's a violinist. They take him out of this music hall where he has sold out crowds and makes tons and tons of money. Like his tickets are so expensive. Anyway, they move him to a subway and have him start playing music in a subway, right? Well, people at the subway, the subway station, they have no idea who this guy is, right? And they're all just walking by and they're like, what in the world? This is so weird. A couple of times, like some little kids stop and you can tell they're like really intrigued and their parents like, come on, we're in a hurry. And it's like nobody realizes who he is. And so then you discover later that he's this very famous musician that sells out the music hall, makes all kinds of money, like one of the best in the world. And so this video then kind of explains what Aristotle can teach us about persuasion. And it talks about what went wrong with this musician, why people didn't stop. And, he's used to people like in music halls that are like, soon as he comes out onto stage, they're just silent, right? They're like in awe of him because he's so amazing. But in the subway, it's like people could care less. They're like, we don't know who this guy is, what up, and they're like, got to get on the subway. And so this video just kind of explains, well, when you take him out of the expected place and put him somewhere else, it's like people that they don't know, right? They don't recognize him. And so you don't have that ethos, you don't have the credibility, right? The logic of where he should be playing versus playing in the subway. And so essentially, it's like an Aristotle breakdown of what went wrong when they moved him to the subway instead of the music hall he was used to playing at. Okay, and that's all I wanted to cover there. So again, those slides are linked on the calendar in case you need to come back to them. Okay, now the next item on our agenda, we may get out a little bit early tonight. I don't know, we'll see here. I want you to read U.S. public school. This one makes me kind of sad, but U.S. public schools get a D+ for public or for poor conditions. So as you're reading this article, just in your notes, pen, pencil, whatever you've got, even a napkin, wherever you want to jot down some notes, but I want you to see if you can find examples of ethos or ethos, right? Credibility. Can you find examples of pathos, right? Or emotional loaded language or stories, anything trying to create an emotional reaction for us? Or logos, any numbers that you see, we'll write down as examples of logos. And so I want you to spend a little bit of time reading this article. And again, seeing if you can find ethos, pathos, and logos. Jot down 2 or 3 examples of each, and then we're going to come back and share out and discuss. Okay, and I think I'll get us out here a little bit early today. So I'm trying to think let me look here. How long is this one? I can't remember. It's not super long. Okay, so we've got about 2 pages there. Would 8:10 be enough time, or is that too quick?
I think that'll be okay.
You think that's okay? Okay, so let's
a couple more minutes to be safe, even though I do think it'll be okay.
Yep, you want to go 8:15, 8:20? You guys tell me.
Whatever the masters say, I can do.
Let's shoot for 8:20. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, and should give you plenty of time to read and get some examples jotted down. So let me put that in the chat for those of you that aren't on the calendar, because I know some people aren't. Okay, so I just put that article in the chat. Again, you're looking for ethos, logos, and pathos. And then we will come back and share out and discuss what you find. Okay, so let's meet back at 8:20. Okay, I'll see you in just a little bit. Give you some time to read and find ethos, logos, and pathos. All right, my friends, if everyone could start making their way back. Hopefully, I gave you enough time there to read the article and then to find several examples of each of the ethos or ethos, pathos or pathos, and logos. So hopefully, like I said, you had enough time to do that. So now's when I'm going to need you to be kind of brave and unmute and share with us some of the examples that you found of each of those. I don't know. Let's start with ethos, right? Or credibility. What are some examples that you found within this article of the author trying to use some sort of ethos or ethos, right, to enhance their argument by bringing in credible sources? What are some of those credible sources or some of those examples that you found?
I would say some of the credible sources, well, depending on your perspective, CNN, the American Society of Civil Engineers as well. I don't recall whether or not when they were speaking from the teacher's perspective, if this came directly from the teacher. But I know that he did say that, or he or she, I'm sorry, I don't remember who wrote the article, that most of the stuff was coming from the public schools themselves. So I would say that's even credible.
Yes, yes, yes,
Right?
yes. Very good.
Oh, okay, thank you. I hope I understood that right.
Yes, you did. Yes, very good. Yes, excellent, excellent. Any other examples of ethos that anyone wants to brave it and share with us? Anything else you found?
I can go again. I feel like he would, I'm sorry. The author of this article was very good with using like numbers and percentages as far as when certain schools was built and things like that. So I
Yes,
would
and
say
you
that.
kind of gave us a natural segue there. So yeah, let's talk about logos, right? Or logic or numbers. Give me some examples of numbers that are numbers or facts, right? That are used throughout this piece. There's quite a few examples. Somebody give us some examples of some of the logos or numbers being used.
I wrote down that they mentioned that 65% of the schools were over 41 years old.
For sure. Very good. Great example. Great example. Okay, give me some more examples, other numbers that are used.
Yeah, they mentioned also that a third of that schools are over 51 years old, so they are really, really old. They said something that for me was like really interesting because maybe they didn't like fixing that and the school was like really old, so the conditions, I guess the conditions for the school for that schools they were like really good. So I pay attention of that because they said they mentioned, 51 years old. This is a lot of time. And they didn't fix it, so you should think about it. It's a lot of time for me.
Yes, very good. And it looks like Zylan may not have his microphone working. So I'm going to read what he put in the chat, if that's okay with everyone. So Zylan wrote, he gave a quote, quote, "The American Society of Civil Engineers gives the condition of America's 100,000 public school buildings an overall grade of a D plus," end quote. Zylan says this presents an authoritative source and statistical data to show the nationwide scale of the problem. For sure. Yes, Zion, very good. Very good. Definitely, right? Those numbers. 100,000 public schools, the overall grade is a D plus. Yikes. Right. But then I love how you talked about the ethos or the ethos, right, side of that, the American Society of Civil Engineers, right? They're experts coming in from an engineering standpoint and say these schools are not the buildings, right? Not the education in them, but the buildings themselves are problematic. And as Julie was saying, the schools are old, all of those things. Very good. All right, so let's now get to, which one have we not done? Pathos. What are some examples of pathos that you found in this particular piece? So this is going to be emotion, right? Places where where the writer is trying to get you to have an emotional reaction. Could be word choice. Maybe they're going to use some really strong words to get you worked up. Maybe they're going to tell you some stories, right, about how bad something is or how good something is. Anything that appeals to emotion is going to be pathos. So give me some examples. Where did you see some pathos coming up?
So for pathos, I've kind of just summarized whenever I was reading through the article. So I think it was in paragraph 1. It was talking about emotions of fear when the kids didn't want to eat lunch because of the cockroaches. And then also the feeling of like when you're desperate enough to go on strikes, how the heat decreases the scores, and then the kids getting anxious because of the heat. And then also the emotion of despair and sadness that these kids have to go through all of these poor uh, just environments.
Also, when they talk about the teachers, how the teachers are affected by COVID, and also what was it? Let me pull it back up. The violence
School
throughout,
violence.
yep, the school violence and things like that. That was like right there. I understood the emotions of it all, like how stressful it could be. And then you add the conditions of these schools, it's like, okay, all right.
Yeah, like the no air conditioning and them saying that some of the students were struggling to breathe and having asthma.
Yeah, I thought when they were talking about how like it was so hot and they were, you know,
Yeah,
the students were like embarrassed of like their sweat stains
right,
and
right,
because like
right.
that's something we can all like relate to is, you know, embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can only imagine how they felt. So it gives you more of a, feeling behind it.
One of the things I found also with pathos was the parents' perspective of it, where they were having a hard time saying they can't get off work. You know, they're just starting a job as far as the schools having to close early because of the extreme heat conditions and everything as well.
Yes, excellent job. Lots of emotion in this piece, right? And like somebody said, a lot of emotion that we can relate to, right? When people get hot, they get angry like that. It's just it's what happens. And so, when they were talking about like discipline going up and fights, but also just like being kind of self-conscious as a teenager who's sweating a lot. But also when they're talking about opening the windows at night to let air come in and like, talking about flies and wasps and just as a teacher, right, I'm like envisioning like all of these distractions, during the day on top of the heat. But a very interesting read. But I think the thing that I probably appreciate most about this article is how well they blend the ethos pathos logos, right? And trying to convince us that America's public schools need help, right? Not talking specifically about the education within the schools, but talking about the buildings themselves. And I think that's something that a lot of people perhaps overlook. The age and the upkeep of some of these buildings is so difficult. But a pretty good job again. And this is just me going out finding articles that are published online, right? Where I'm trying to find, okay, what are some examples of argument I can bring in, we can analyze. And this is just an example of a writer I found that I thought, did a really good job of integrating ethos, pathos, and logos and presented a pretty solid argument about, how America's public school buildings, the physical buildings themselves, need some work. Okay, anything else that we've left out that you still want to talk about before I transition us to the homework for this week? Anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about with that article?
I really like that article.
I do too. I do too. And I think that naturally, I think that this is what most of us use without even knowing it. Like when we're trying to persuade or argue something, right? We try to establish credibility. We try to have some kind of an emotional, an emotional draw to get people invested in what we're trying to persuade for or against. We try to use some logic or some reason with some numbers. And so I don't know, this piece just kind of resonated with me because I think, you can go online just about anywhere and find examples of people using these methods to persuade. Yeah, I love it. Okay, friends, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here to talk through the homework. The homework's going to look a little different this week. I don't know if that's good or bad. You're not writing a paper, so I'm surprised I don't hear cheers yet, but I will continue grading your literacy narratives. I will hopefully have those all graded before I see you again next week, and hopefully I'll have some feedback for you. So if you feel like you want to make revisions to that to improve your score, you can. And speaking of that, keep submitting any revisions that you want, and I'll keep updating your scores as far as that goes. But the homework this week's going to look a little different. Okay, so in class today, we kind of just introed argumentation in general, just like what are some things that we naturally do. Then we added some labels to some of those things with Aristotle's methods of argumentation, ethos, pathos, logos. Now for homework, you're going to dig into, I'm excited for this one. You're going to dig into the Rogerian model of argumentation. I'm going to say that this one may not be as common as the other two methods we do. So I kind of want to, I don't know, I guess explain a little bit better. As you are going through the homework though, here are the steps. Essentially, you're going to follow everything on the calendar. The very first thing you're going to do is view this video explanation, right? Goes through and tells you about Rogerian methods of argumentation. Right, then you're going to read the Cole State explanation of what it is. And I put a little note here to take some notes. And then here's another short video clip that I wanted you to watch just to kind of reinforce the whole idea of what exactly is Rogerian argument. Then, just like we did in class today, I want you to read this article, Shad's How California Bill Will Impact College Sports and What Comes Next. And as you are reading that article, I want you to take notes over these questions I listed below. Okay, what evidence of Rogerian argumentation exists in this piece? Does the use of Rogerian argumentation improve or decrease the editorial's effectiveness? And what could be done to improve the effectiveness of this editorial? And I put here, you can consider Aristotle or Rogers in that particular explanation. So let me give you a little background about Rogerian argument. Okay, so Rogerian argument, I think, is different. I'm not going to lie, for people in Western culture, Americans, I think we kind of struggle. Again, I am totally generalizing an entire population of people. That's so jacked up. But I really do think that Americans struggle with Rogerian argument because it's ingrained in our brains that we always want to win. Right. And so it's like with the Toolman model, you're really trying to lay out your claim and you're trying to refute rebuttals. Whereas with Rogerian argument, there's not a winner. And I think that's why Americans don't use this method as often. The Rogerian method of argumentation, though, is really trying to get to a place of shared understanding, right, or common knowledge. There's not a winner or loser. It's where both sides are going to compromise and come together like for a middle ground. And so, I don't know, for example, and I'm just going to throw this out there, I got to be kind of careful, but like if we're talking about a hot topic, or a wicked problem, a topic that people have very strong opinions about, like abortion, right? It is very unlikely that we're going to move somebody who's way over here on the spectrum to way over here on the spectrum, right? It's just not very logical for us to assume that we can move someone one way or the other, right? What we might choose to do instead is try to find some shared understanding or a common ground where we can try to meet in the middle, right? And so that might be a better mode of argumentation, right? As opposed to trying to move somebody from here to here. Gun control might be another, hot topic or hot button issue where you may not be able to move somebody who's way over here, way over here. So instead, maybe you're going to try to argue for some shared understanding or some common ground in the middle. And so again, Rogerian argument, I think, gets overlooked a lot, especially in American culture, because a lot of times we are trying to persuade or we're trying to argue to win, right? Whereas Rogerian argument, there's not a winner, right? We're both kind of compromising. We're both coming together in the middle. And so it's a little different. But I think just kind of knowing that might help. And one of my examples on there is a presidential speech. One of those videos is a presidential speech where the president is actually kind of advocating for some common or middle ground. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting example to show in that video. So, but again, a different method of argumentation, but still, again, not trying to persuade one way or the other, more so trying to come to some shared understanding, uses a lot of neutral language as opposed to emotional language. So very neutral, just presenting both sides, trying to get people to fall in the middle. So kind of an interesting one. So again, you're not writing a paper. So there's that, right? You don't have to write a paper this week. But I do want you to go step by step through the homework listed here and have all of that prepared for next Tuesday when we meet. So as soon as we meet on Tuesday, we will hop right into discussion over this particular article about college sports and what comes next. We will dig deep into it to find evidence of Rogerian argument. We'll talk about whether we think the Rogerian argument is a strength or a weakness, right? And I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of Americans think Rogerian argument is weak in general because it doesn't really have, it's not gung-ho, right? It's not all or nothing. It's more of that, like I said, that shared understanding. So keep that in mind as you are going through that particular piece. Okay. And then next week we'll meet back together. We'll discuss that. And then we will cover our last method of argumentation, which will be the Toolman model. Okay. So I'm going to end class with that. We've got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any questions or you want to stay on, certainly I'll stay on and answer any questions. Otherwise, have a fantastic night. Thank you for your participation. It's been fun. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Thank
everybody.
you. Have a good
See y'all
night.
next week.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, Michaela, everything good?
Yes, I just sent you what I was typing, but I
Nope.
was a slow type.
Nope, I just saw that come through. Yep, no problem. I was gonna say, I think I've graded maybe 3, so you're good. I'm
Oh
gonna try to
my.
get the rest graded this weekend. So you are totally fine. Just submit as soon as you can, okay?
I don't know, the way you grade it, just it quite literally looks like you're just going through every single one and you're putting so much thought and detail into grading them.
Well, it does take me a long time, I will say that.
Yeah.
And I don't do this for my high school kids. I only do that for my night class. Because I give you guys the opportunity to rewrite, whereas I have so many high school students, I just don't have the time. And so I kind of feel bad, but I feel like when you're paying for the class, I don't know, I feel like you deserve more feedback. So
I mean, yeah, that is true.
Mhm.
Because English is not my strong suit,
That's okay. That's all right.
even though it's my main language. But that makes sense.
That's all good.
Well,
I get it.
I will let you go. You have a wonderful night.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.